Good afternoon, good evening, or whenever what time it is you're watching us. Good to see you. This is Pastor Devin Miller, the real pastor, the true pastor, bringing you yet another edition of Financial Matters. Why? Because financials matter. And you know, this is what we do as a part of Clear Faith Christian Ministries, ministries that are clear on where their faith lies. And so we are glad to be here. We're glad that you're here, and we'll be glad when you get here. So, in all things, we're glad. And we're also glad to have Brother Id- Idris. You don't have to help me with your name when you come on, but Idris Rasheed Jr. Now, last week, it was a mess. I'm going to tell you right now, it was a mess. Your pastor is trying to be technologically savvy, and he's not, and he just needs to admit it. But we did the whole show with just talking to each other. I did not record it. I forgot to hit the button. It was a good talk. You should have been there. But I am trying to, give you guys more, give you time, which gives me time to get everything together. So I'm doing the 2 minute countdown, which is pretty cool. But I forgot to hit the go live button so that it was counting down live. So all the time that we're talking, I'm looking at the screen and we're talking and everything, and I'm looking up in the corner where it says live, and there was no live. And I looked over in the other corner and it said go live. And I was like, got to be more careful. So I did everything right today. And I'm going to bring on Rasheed Jr., and he's going to tell me how to pronounce his first name. I know it's the same name as the actor, but I didn't like him because all the women liked him. But anyway, um, but I'm gonna have the other one tell me how to do it because I can't talk to the one that's got millions of dollars. So I would like to talk to him. So if anybody knows him, hook up your boy. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started on today, and I'm going to bring him on. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm doing better than I was last week. I tell you that much because man, we went through that whole thing and not a piece of it was recorded. I was kicking myself if I could kick myself. I was trying to kick myself because it was just terrible. And I've even done it on my own show. So it's like, okay, Devin, you got to be intentional about this. So we're just going to touch briefly on what we talked about last week, but really get into, the what it is that you actually do for this show, so that we stay consistent. So I'm doing well. So tell everybody, including me, how to pronounce your first name.
So it's Idris.
Idris. Okay,
Yes.
okay. I'm always trying to go Idiris. I'm like, where's the I in there? But it's Idris. Okay,
Yes.
okay. Say it 3 times and you lock it in. So,
Hmm.
tell the people just a little bit about your bio, what you do, and then we're gonna get into the nuts and bolts of it, as far as in generality, but the nuts and bolts of what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Idris Rasheed. I reside here in Arizona, in the Phoenix area, and what I do is I teach people how to have more time and money freedom. Time to do things that they enjoy doing the most with the people they enjoy doing it most, and the money to be able to do those things, to, facilitate with those things. And what we do it through our three philosophies. One is teaching people how to have multiple streams of income. We call it multi-handed income. We also educate people about money. We don't get any kind of financial education in schools growing up, any programs, no matter what program you're in. So we help to fill in those gaps there too. And of course, our third philosophy is self-improvement, self motivation. So together with these three philosophies, we're empowering families and business owners and even individuals too on how to have a happier life.
Okay, all right. And how long have you been doing this?
I've been in finance for almost 10 years now. It'll be 10 years in August. I've been in this particular area, started this business about 4 years ago.
Okay. And the uniqueness of you is the fact that you work with your father.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, Who's the boss?
Well, I'm sure even he would agree that I'm pretty much running things because I do all the
Okay,
trainings and all of that.
okay, okay.
Everything.
Yeah, I laugh because my father uh, came into the ministry at a later age. He came into the ministry at 70,
Mm,
and his whole philosophy was, I've done everything that I've wanted to do, and so I might as well spend the latter part of my years serving God. So, but he was a deacon all his life, so he's always been in the church. So, but he wasn't really in the preached ministry. So when he went for his trial sermon in the Baptist faith, you have to do a trial sermon before you get licensed. And so he was at my home church. So I was in Minnesota at the time. So I flew in and I introduced him before he got up to speak. And I said, you know, now you all know who this man is. He's been faithful to God, been faithful to the church for many, many years, but now he's taking on another mantle in the preached word. And so I said, I want y'all to give this rookie, give him a listening ear, and give him a chance, because you know he's a rookie, and because I had been in ministry for 15 years at that point. And so I said, and this will be the only time that I'll be able to call my dad a rookie. So after this, he will go back to being my dad. But right now, since I got more time in, he's the rookie that's coming up to speak before you. And then I introduced him. Church went crazy. It was like, because I grew up in that church. He had
mm,
been there all my life, and so whenever I see a father son team, you know, I'm like, okay, what's the dynamic, you know? So I definitely can understand that, and I think your dad said he was going to try to come, but I know he had another engagement he had to do, so that's more than
mm.
fine. I said, as long as I get one of y'all, I'm good. So that's fine. So tell me what drew you into this line, because I think when we talked last time when no one else was listening, you said you were in banking, and you said it even today, you were in banking, but what made you transition?
Well, I was in the banking role for about 7 years, I would say altogether. And what I saw was pretty much how the banking industry works, at least here in the US.
Okay.
And a lot of what I saw was centered around the point that, we go to our banks when typically when we need help with something. Either we need, we got a job and we have a paycheck coming in, we need somewhere to put that paycheck and to
Right.
have no money come out. Or we may have situations where we have found ourselves in trouble, we're looking for some financial help, or even as much as, we're just planning for our financial future. So obviously, where do we
Mm-hmm.
start? We start with our, local bank. But what I found was that the banking industry, the way that it is structured, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of how it goes, it's not really helping people the way that we would think it is. You know, they tend to cater more to, and I say they, but most banks tend to cater more to the more affluent customers. So people who have more in revenue, people who make more in money, they have more in assets.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the everyday people, the common people that you know and I know and have always been around, it's not really set up to help in specific situations. For
Right.
example, like I said, if I had a single mom that came in, she's paying 4 or 5 different creditors a month. She just wants to apply for a loan to pay everything off so she can focus on one payment per month. And I believe I said this last week that it's really hard to get those applications approved because of their situation. So
Yeah.
they're trying to get out of the situation, but because of the situation, they're
Yeah.
stuck in the situation.
Right. Right. Yeah. Put that on a t-shirt.
Mhm.
uh, okay. Okay. So it was more or less you saw it as a need that needed to be met as opposed to just an opportunity.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. And how did you draw your father into it?
Well, it's funny that you asked that question because we host events throughout the year in various
Mm,
places. So I actually invited my mom to come to one of our events. This was in Houston, Texas, about a couple of years ago, and she was under oppression. It was she didn't know what it was for. She kind of just took my good grace, I guess, and hopped on the plane and joined me. But
right,
and she'll tell you the story. I really like the way she tells the story because it really, again, it goes back to why I do what I do. But when she came in, when we have these events, you go to check in, register, hey, we're here,
right,
get our names, make sure we get our name tags and everything. And she noticed that there were a lot of people that were coming in. The moms were coming in with their kids. They might have one kid, holding one kid, bringing the other ones in. Parents are coming in together. Families,
right.
pretty much, are coming in together. And it kind of
Okay,
shook her attention. She was like, "Okay, there's a lot of people here who are, seem to be together like that." And she also noticed that everyone's speaking different languages
mm,
because here on the West Coast, we have a varied myriad of people from all around the world. So you all
right,
constantly
right.
hearing, which is nothing for me because I'm so used to it. But with her being coming from such a small town in South Carolina, that was kind of foreign. So,
Mm-hmm.
but she noticed one thing that really stuck out to her was she noticed that everyone was happy. Everyone was so excited to be there, and everyone was so happy to see each other, greeting each other, hugging.
Mm,
They hadn't seen each other in a while. She's like, "Well, I think I'm going to stick around to see what this was about." And of course, we
right,
had speakers and things throughout the weekend, and she saw the value in this because she herself, she's 77 years old, so she's
okay,
been around for a while. She kind of to
right.
see what the pretty much what the mindset of the younger people, she would say, are.
Sure.
In particular, her grandchildren. I don't have any children
Yeah,
myself, but she has a lot of grandchildren.
right.
So she really wanted to set the tone, set the example for them, help them understand more about money themselves. So she, after experiencing that for those 3 days, which is again why we encourage people to come in and work on yourself, the self improvement part.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I think I want to be a part of this. So
Right,
I introduced her, got her signed up. She came in, and throughout the week, we have different trainings, especially
right.
for people who are coming in, to
Okay,
teach you how do you, do things, how do you, do certain stuff, a lot of the products that we have, things like that.
okay,
So, being where they are, they would have to attend the training over Zoom, so remotely. Well, my
okay.
dad was there. He was listening in on some of the trainings. He kind of heard some of the nuts and bolts of what's going on. He was like, "Wait a second, I think I want to be a part of this too. Like, what do I
Right,
need to do?"
right,
And it's so funny. And I tell the story all the time that, when I started this business, I wanted it to be a family business. My intention was to have my brother, and then we have an ex sister in law that we're still close with, and the three of us
uh-huh.
were going to be together building this. They weren't interested. So,
Oh,
however,
wow.
my parents were. So we ended up being a family business, just in a different way.
Okay. Wow, wow. So it really gives a testimony to the work you do to really kind of draw that drew them into it. It wasn't so much this is my son and I want to support my son. It was like, no, I believe in the concept and
Exactly.
I
Yes.
want to get involved with the concept of what's going on. That's cool. That's cool. Because a lot of times in family businesses, uh, technically, um, no matter who's in charge, it turns into the family side of who's in charge.
Hmm.
They may not have the title, but they have the title. And it's nice that they were really, your parents, and that's credit to you and your parents, that they really believed in what you were doing, not just who you were. And that makes it more, to me, that makes it more easy to work together because you're kind of all focused on the same thing. It's not who's in charge, who's doing this or whatever. They know, they've been around long enough to know that somebody's got to maintain and manage, but it doesn't have to be us. And we're not entitled because we're the parents. I think of all these movies that come out, Kingdom Business, and we have these empires, but you have all this infighting that goes on because somebody wants to be the man or be the woman. But I really appreciate your story because that's really how family business should be. We're all working for the same goal, but we all have different expertise in making the goal work. So I do appreciate that, and kudos to your parents as well. All right, so let's get into the general nuts and bolts. I know that money is different for everybody, and everybody gets into it for different reasons. But what is it, that you offer in particular in the various areas that you have and the various products that you operate in? What would a typical person, like if I was coming in and wanted your services, what would I receive?
Well, the first thing that we do is, especially for our clients that are coming in, we do what's called a needs assessment. We sit down with them, we take a look at what they currently have.
Okay.
We ask them questions around, like, what does your future look like? What kind of future do you want to have? Particularly in retirement. How did you want your retirement years to go? Do you want to
Right.
travel? You want to do that? Do you want to be able to enjoy having the freedom of not having to get up and go to a job and you're okay just staying home? Do you want to go visit the grandkids or visit family, as much as you can? What does that future look like for you? Uh, and another thing, we ask you, when do you want to retire? Like, when is your preferred time that you want to retire? Obviously, for younger kids, that kind of knocks them off a little bit. It's like, well, I never really thought about that, but maybe I want to
Mhm.
retire by the time I'm 40, 45. It's like, okay, great, excellent. Well, next question is, how much do you need to have saved? How much money do you need to have saved so you
Right.
can, properly retire by that age? Because the object of the game is not just retiring. You want to be able to retire, but not run out of money. Now you got to go back to work.
Right. Right. The Walmart syndrome, I call that.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's funny. My in fact, side note, my business partner was telling me a story about she was at Target with her daughter, and her daughter was like, "Oh, isn't it cute that the old people they come back, after they retire, they come back to Target to socialize and work." And she's like, "No, darling, they didn't come back to socialize. They came back because they weren't properly set up for their retirement, and now they have
Right.
to come back to work."
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
tragic
Yeah.
situation.
My dad got caught in that. He was uh, this was back when he turned 55. He was forced to retire because the company was shifting. So
Hmm.
he had to take retirement, and he hadn't saved up enough to live, at age 55. That was pretty young. So he ended up uh, going to work for the city of Milwaukee, and he retired from there after about 10, 11 years of work. But that can be kind of hard for older people who have put in
Mm,
so much time and thought that they had prepared themselves. But I think sometimes you forget that inflation, life keeps changing, and so your dollar then is not your dollar now.
mm-mm,
And then what do you do? But the interesting thing about it is because my dad worked so many positions, because he started at American Motors when in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, did insurance for a period of time, worked for SC Johnson for 20 plus years, uh, and that's where he had to retire. And then he went and worked for the city for another 10 years. He had all these pensions, and so when he finally retired from the city, he was making more money with the pensions coming in plus Social Security at that time. Now, this was back in, um, my dad finally retired probably in the late, uh, just right around 2000. 2000, or 2. So, but he had worked, like all his life. And so when he retired, I always say he retired twice. He was living, I mean, he wasn't living high, but he was living decent because all of those pensions were, and he did investments and, had an IRA and all of that, but he managed it well, but he was able to, live pretty comfortably. But that was back when pensions were pensions and they honored them and you didn't have to worry about them running out and all that kind of stuff. So in today's society and economy, are you finding, here's the question, are you finding that a lot more middle-aged to older persons that you come in contact with, are they running into that gap as far as, I know what I'd like to, but here's what I have, and looking back, they see that they didn't properly plan for later on.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you asked that question because actually, majority of the people that we sit down with, they have something in place, either through
Okay.
usually through their job. They have something through work.
Right.
What we educate them on is, okay, are you relying on that one thing that you have through your job? Well, let's look at the reality of it. There's three things that we talk about when it comes to retirement. You mentioned the first thing was inflation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
has anyone gotten a tank of gas lately? That's a little bit different than about a month and a half ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, again, look at the grocery stores now since compared to before COVID. Things
Right.
have gone up tremendously. So inflation is the
Right.
first thing. The second thing that we educate on are taxes because people don't understand that a lot of the vehicles that these retirement accounts they have, particularly through their job, they're what's called tax deferred accounts, which means you don't pay the taxes on now, but when you go to access them, you're going to pay that on the back end, which is going
Right.
to take a huge chunk away from your overall balance. And then, of course, the third thing that we educate on is healthcare, because as we get older, we're living longer these days. That is a miracle, through a lot of medicines and everything. But at some point,
Mm-hmm.
as we age, typically our health tends to decline.
Right.
So, do you have something in place for when that time happens? Or if it happens prematurely, you can get sick as early as, teens, 20, 30 years old and have
Right.
to deal with that for the rest of your life too. So, we want to make sure that you're prepared for all three of those things at the same time.
Got it. Got it. One of our followers and viewers is here, Lady Virgo, and she says, "Good evening and nice to meet you." So, just wanted to let you know that someone's watching. So,
It's great.
okay. So once you kind of get that idea of where they want to go and how they not just where they want to go, what are the vehicles that you introduce to them on how to get to their a desired goal?
Well, one of the suggestions that we have is, in uh, life insurance or within life insurance, we have what we call the old insurance and the new insurance. So the old insurance, you sign up for a policy, you pass away, your beneficiary or family, whatever, get the whatever's left over in that. Nowadays, we have what's called living benefits, where you can actually access your policy while you're still living.
Mm-hmm.
So what that
Okay.
means is one big part of it is if you have any kind of chronic or critical illness, anything where you can't do two of the six daily activities of living, like you can't feed yourself on your own, you can't bathe yourself, you can't even like get up out of bed to go, to go around the house or anything on your own, you can actually tap into your policy's value for it. I'm sure we can all agree that one of the number one reasons why people file bankruptcy in the U.S. is because of some major medical expense that they weren't prepared for.
Right.
How many times do people have to, got to remortgage the house now because someone fell down and broke a hip or something, or someone got
Right.
diagnosed with something. Now they got to go back and forth to different facilities to figure out what's going on with them so they can get treated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the, I guess you say perks or benefits or products that we have for people. Another one is when you look at those retirement accounts. So, like you were saying, your dad worked at multiple jobs before he ultimately retired completely, right? Well,
Right.
when he had those pensions, you may not know this, you might know this, but do you know how much he was paying in taxes on those?
I don't know what bracket he was in.
Not sure. Okay,
Because he
because
remarried and then my stepmother at the time was in a higher tax bracket coming in because she was a senior buyer. She kind of went through a transition too. She worked for a major manufacturing company as a buyer, and then they forced her into retirement, and then she got connected with Harley Davidson as a senior buyer, and that's where she retired from. So she came in, kind of a little higher than he did, and I don't know if they filed joint or separate. So I don't know that.
okay, okay, excellent. Yeah, because and the reason why I asked is because, like I said, when you tap into those retirement accounts, obviously you're paying taxes on the back end. See, I thought
Right,
that once you retired and you're living off your retirement savings, you didn't pay taxes anymore. You kind of served your
right,
time.
Yeah.
How naive was I thinking that?
I've given you all my taxes. You know, that
Yeah.
FICA
I-
person is rich right now. FICA. You know, I remember when I first got my first paycheck and they had FICA on there. I was like, "Who's FICA? I don't know nobody named FICA. Why they getting some of my money?" You know. So, but yeah, yeah. I don't know. You know, like I said, it was so years ago. So it's the tax code may have been different and things like that. But I did know so it may not have been as much as it is today. But because this was in the '80s and the '90s when
Mm,
he was pulling his money out. So that was a whole different financial era
yeah.
compared to where we are now.
Yeah, so on those retirement accounts there too, like I said, again, you got to pay the taxes from them. So what we
Right.
encourage people to do is what we call a rollover. We roll it over to um, accounts where, first of all, you need to understand too that those retirement accounts, they're exposed to the market. And I'm sure we saw that back in 2008, 2009 when that happened. We saw it again with COVID. We're seeing it today with between these wars going on and tariffs and all that good stuff.
Right.
We see it's constantly going up and down, up and down. When it's up, it's great. Everyone's doing great. But what happens when the market goes down and your money goes
Yep.
down? That's your
Yep.
nest egg. So we want to protect that from what's going on in the market. So we do a rollover where it puts you into an account that gives you what's called a floor and a cap. What does that mean? Well, with the cap, when the market's up, of course, you're guaranteed to get up to a certain rate. But when the market goes down with that floor, you're not losing. You're not getting negative returns, I guess you could say.
Right.
So our clients, back through 2008, 2009, when that whole crisis happened, they were thriving through that. Also, again, through COVID, because they weren't losing out. They weren't missing out on those gains.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we want you to be able to enjoy your retirement as much as possible. So within these accounts, you're only taxed on, you're not, if you roll your money over, you're not taxed on your principal. You're only taxed on your gain. So how much you're gaining throughout the year. So year after year, without these particular vehicles, you're paying taxes on your full balance over and over.
Right.
With this one, you're kind of protected a little bit because you're not paid so much. Plus, it's guaranteed for life. So no matter how long you live, you would never run out of money.
Okay. Okay. And so from those type of accounts, they pay you a monthly payout, or do you set that up as well as how you want the rollout to happen?
Well, yeah. Well, so once you get it, get it established, get set up, you get to decide how long. Basically, you have to, and this is another thing about money that I'm learning too is that the longer you have your money somewhere where you can't reach it, where you can't touch it, the better off you are because the better return you're going to get, pretty much. So
Right.
pretty much, however long your money stays away determines how much of it comes back with friends
Sure.
and
Sure.
family. So typically with these, you decide if you want to pretty much invest it for 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, or 10 years. Obviously, the longer you have it tied up, so to speak, the more of a return you're going to get, and then you can start taking those distributions, and that's where you get the income for life on it as well. So once everything's all said and done, you decide how long you want to basically have the funds tied up. Then you can start accessing them after that period of time. And like I said, again, you're only paying taxes on the gains that you got over the time.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Okay. So from your experience and from your expertise, two questions. One, do you target what I call black and brown communities or our community, or do you, kind of like whoever's in need, you kind of meet that need? That's one question. But then the second question is, what have you found to be kind of some of the trends that prevent people from doing, what you're suggesting? If they're saying, "Oh, that sounds too much," or what's your pushback in the years that you've been in this?
Well, first question is, yeah, we're open to anyone. We're educational first, so we have a motto, mission over commission. So we
Okay.
want people to have access to the education part because,
Right.
9 times out of 10, when we're sitting down with someone, they're not really ready to do anything that day. But when the day does come that they want to do something, we want them to at least have something in their back pocket to go off of.
Hmm.
Say, oh
Sure.
yeah, someone told me about this. I should ask these questions. These are the questions I should ask about that.
Yep.
I do see a strong need, obviously, in the Black and Brown community to have this education because, when you think of the truly wealthy, the ones who are getting the education the most, the truly wealthy, probably aren't the Black and Brown, people.
Sure.
However, our mission is over education. So anyone who's willing to sit down and learn a thing or two, I am more willing to schedule time to meet with you. And what you get from us, what you won't get again at your bank. If you go to your bank, you want to talk to a financial advisor, someone who can, run you through this. First of all, you have to have at least $500,000 in assets before they even take time to sit down with you and have a meeting with you. I don't know too many people are sitting like that. I don't know about you.
And
And
if you
then
know them,
second,
please give them our name. We're looking for sponsors.
oh yeah, exactly, yes. We all gonna do for that. The second thing is that if you do work with an advisor, they're gonna charge you. It's usually about 0.5% to 1% of your portfolio, which over time that's a lot of money.
Right.
You think about 30 to 45 years or so. That's a lot of money you're paying to someone else to basically do the stuff that they should be doing for you because you're a valued customer, a valued client.
Right. Right.
Third thing is that that particular advisor can only offer you products that that bank has. So if you go to like JP Morgan Chase, they can only offer you what JP Morgan Chase has. If you go to Merrill Lynch, they can only offer you that. It's cookie
Hmm.
cutter. So it may not even be the best thing for you, but and keep in mind they have a quota to fill. They're going to push those products on you because they got to meet that quota need, and that's all they really have to offer you anyway.
Sure. Sure.
We're more brokers, so we get to shop around with whoever we want. We work over 150 different places, so we can find something for you,
Right.
and we can find it for the cheapest price. So it's like Amazon. You type in what you're looking for, Amazon go out, they find a business that has that product for the cheapest price, connect you with them, they get paid on the back end. Same thing for us. We connect you to, and we work with firms like Nationwide, Fidelity, Transamerica, household names that people know and understand. But we can work with
Hmm.
whoever we want. But we do work with the big name firms. So again, we can find the best thing for you for the cheapest price. So you're not
Right.
draining. Again, the object of the game is to keep more of your money.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Okay. And so, do you find that the challenge is the lack of knowledge, or is the challenge a lack of what I would call delayed gratification?
I would say it's a combination of both
Okay.
because when you think finance, we always think it's this great, big, huge, complicated thing that there's
Hmm.
so many moving parts in it that there's no way you can fully know exactly what to do to make the best move. But at the same time, I have found this has just been me. I can't speak for the next, agent or anything that
Sure.
people tend to want to wait for things. It's like, well, I got to think about it some more, do my own research, even though they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what research to do, but we get hesitant on it because it's something that we think we can put off to later. It's almost like anything else. How many times you put things off and then next thing you know, it's been about another 4 or 5 years have gone by, still haven't done it yet, haven't even started.
Yep. Right.
And
Okay.
then when we get
Okay.
to be, when you get closer to retirement age, oh, I would like to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. Let me start planning now. You're kind of late to the game.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting because again, one of the reasons why I developed this podcast is because in our communities we don't do the education part,
Mm,
and you can get caught up in what I call the marketing hype, that everything looks good on TV, and then you start, grasping at everything without really having a plan because you're tied to looking at the money as opposed to the process. And so one
mhm,
of the things I wanted to do when doing this show is to give people the process and teach them, how to, just like you were saying, if you don't do anything else, at least have the questions in your mind so that when you do it, you're not just dependent on the person on the other side of the table telling you what to do. You're asking the right questions to get what you want from that person, because they're there to serve you, not just to get your money. So my last question based on that is, and this may be a stretch for you, and I want to stretch you.
Hmm.
How do you see how do you see the role of the church in the education of financial literacy?
Oh, that's a really great question because I'm still learning about how this could be an asset as well. Well, when you think, well, me personally, when I think of church, the first thing I think of is community. You have your church that you go to, kind of like you said, you grew up in the church, so you've been there for a while, right?
Right,
And the church
right.
is there to serve the community, to serve and meet the needs of the community.
Okay.
Um, some churches are in a place, they're fortunate enough and blessed enough that they can actually offer scholarships to kids going to college.
Okay.
Some kind of aren't in that situation, like they're maybe struggling a little bit more depending on the church and where they are. What
Right.
I see happening is, for one thing, if churches are willing and able to open up, to the community, to the congregation, to allow these classes to be taught there, to say, hey, on this day at this time, we're going to do some financial literacy classes, encourage people to come in, to at least learn a little something, nothing else.
Right.
You don't have to do anything, obviously you don't have to do anything at the end of the day, but at least learn, what's going on. Learn what is why should we start planning now? How much should you
Mm-hmm.
save out of your paycheck
Mm-hmm.
each pay period to get to where you want to go? How do you even
Right.
start this process? But more importantly, they should open it up for people to understand why it's important. Why is it
Yeah.
important to save? Why is it
Mm-hmm.
important to plan for your future, to plan for any kind of emergency? Once you get that education of what to do and why to do it, then it's up, again, it's up to the person in the community to take
Right.
advantage of it, to take more action for it, or to brush it off and say, no, I deal with it later.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Because again, I just recently got my agent license
Mm.
for life insurance, but I ain't planning on selling no life insurance. Um, I did it because I'm working with a financial company, but they have a faith component. And
Mm.
what they want to do is like we were saying, take this to churches, not only for the church itself to be good stewards, but to also help their congregations be good stewards.
Mm.
And so when I met the gentleman who um, I just met him, he reached out and I reached back and we had a conversation and he told me this. I said, "Well, look here, you can't go into all churches with the concept of how the church can make money because through all these instruments and things like that." I said because that's not the way to go. I mean, one, pastors will jump on it, but it will not trickle down to the congregation. I'm just being real. I've been at this thing for 37 years, so I know how it works. I said, so
Mm.
what you want to do is you really want to go in and talk about stewardship and how to be good managers of your money because that's biblical. And so they can't argue with the Bible.
Yeah.
They can argue with you about how they gonna make whatever, but they can't argue. And they were like, we never thought of it like that. I said, that's why I make the big bucks. But anyway, I said, so I'm willing to go along with you to kind of be that bridge of why it's important to be good stewards. And here's a way in which you can be good stewards. And then you can come in with the further education, but it will be more receptive because their minds are already set on, yeah, if we're going to be good people and good believers and good kingdom people, then we got to be good stewards over what God gives us, and He gives us money, therefore. So you got to take them through the walk. And they were like, well, what do you get out of this? And I said, if you get people that want to do it and they came through what I said, just make a donation to the church. It's like we're
Mm.
not in this for the money, we're in this to help people. But we got to keep the lights on. So just be mindful that you didn't do this on your own. So he's like, well, I'll do one better. Why don't you get your license? I said, hold on, hold on. I stay in my lane. I said, I drive a car that does not have a turn signal. So I stay in my lane. I ain't trying to get in your lane. I ain't trying to get in nobody else's lane. I do what I do. He's like, well, we'll help you get your license so that we can compensate you for anybody that comes through as a referral program. I said, you do whatever you feel is right. But I'm telling you right now, if it looks like you want me to go out and sell a policy, it ain't gonna happen. I'm gonna do just enough to pass this test. And once I pass this test, I get a license. It's gonna hang somewhere. I don't know. And that's all it's gonna do. And so by God's grace, I passed the test on the first run.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I went to the company because they take you through the onboarding and all this. I said, "Ma'am, I know this is your job, but I'm not here to do that." She's like, "Well, you have to." I said, and in my mind, I said, "There's only two things I have to do: stay black and die. Those are the only two things I have to do." I said, "Everything else is left up to me as an option." And so I saw that she was getting frustrated. And I said, "Ma'am, look here. It's not on you. The company is doing something different, and you may not have been aware of it." I said, "So I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm going to talk to the people that I'm actually going to be working with so that they can let you know how it's going to be different." And she was like, "Well, I appreciate you taking that approach." I said, "It ain't your fault that the company's doing something. You doing your job." And I think a lot of times when we come to talking about money or we talk about finances, we can sometimes get defensive because we
Mm,
get challenged. And it's not sense of challenge for challenge's sake, it's because we don't know. And we haven't been taught properly how to ask questions properly. So I try to kind of soften that landing for both sides to say, if you're going to work through this, it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it and how you do it, because that's the education they need to receive to get the proper, to be able to make a righteous decision. So it's not based on personality. It's not based necessarily on presentation, but it's predicated on information. So the better you can inform me, the better I can probably feel confident in what I'm in working with you to do what I want done. And I think what I try to do here is ask the questions that people would typically ask, but also challenge you so that when you go to someone else, you can be like, "Oh yeah, I remember Reverend Miller asked me this thing," and then it's all you're already prepared for the next person. So I really appreciate the process that you have, and I really love that mission over commission, because not a lot of companies, especially in the insurance industry, don't
yeah.
have that concept. It's like the old days. When you don't know about no old days, but I remember the insurance man coming to the house, every month to collect the premium, and you had to trust him or her because you giving them your money. I mean, it wasn't like you could, electronically send it in or anything like that. It was the old shoes to the pavement. You driving around picking up those premiums and those monthly payments, and then you take your cut, and then you send the rest to the company. So back then, there was a lot of trust, because I think about now, if we would have been doing now what they were doing then, there'd be a whole lot of insurance companies underwater and searching for
Mm,
people, because again, we're chasing that dollar and we're not
yeah.
really trying to help the people. So I really appreciate you kind of walking through that. And next week when we get together, what I want to talk about is, now that you have the information, now that you have the ways in which you can meet your future, what is the discipline that's needed? Because again, it's about that delayed gratification. I remember
Hmm.
when I had an insurance policy and my son needed some money for something, and I went to my insurance agent and I was going to cancel my policy because it was a major deal, and he was like, "Devin, you don't have to do that." I was like, "Why not?" He's like, "Devin, you have what's called cash value." I
Hmm.
said, "What's that?" No knowledge. I just thought I bought I think it was like a $15,000-$20,000 policy, enough to cover me a little bit, for my kids'
Mhm.
burial, because we always said life insurance was about when you die, not about living, like you were saying. And he was like, "No, Devin, you've accrued funds each time you paid in your premium. A portion of it goes over here, and it's compound interest." I was like,
Mhm.
"So how much money do I have?" See, duh. I'm like, I'm just trusting you. And he was the person that went to my church, so I trusted him. And he's like, "Devin, you got about this much money in your cash value. So how much do you need?" I said, "Well, I needed this amount." He's like, "Well, just get it from your cash value, and then before the policy runs out, you just got to put that money back so that you get the full benefits of your policy." I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay." Now I said, "Now if I'm a relatively educated man was asking questions, I wonder how many people who may not be as educated but know they need it are not asking the questions and just taking the word of the person. And so I always said, well, anybody that works for me, you gotta earn the trust of the people, not just because you're trustworthy. So that's really the backdrop of what we do here. So I really want to talk about next week is how it is there a way, and have you found a way to teach discipline, in your motivation of people and all of that. How has that played into the work and the service that you provide? So that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to not necessarily get off script, but really talk about what if, because I think this is
Okay.
where we, not just as people of black and brown skin, but I think just as a nation, the volatility of the economy is such that you need to really know how to do a lot with little, but see the benefit on the back end, as opposed to trying to make it all you can right now. Because that's always kind of been my concern is people are trying to, gather, 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 but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mhm.
So the scripture says, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" And so that's really kind of the backdrop of that. So I appreciate you, sir, taking time out of your busy schedule. I always say when I see you in the car, I say this man is really busy because he's pulled off on the side of the road so he can do this 45 minutes and he's back at it. So I appreciate you
Mhm.
doing this and making I'm sure making your car your office and your office in your car, so that you can
Mhm.
keep it moving. And so, any last thoughts before we close out today?
Um, just last thoughts. The thing to think about is the fact that when it comes to what we're discussing today, it doesn't have to be as difficult as you think. It really is easy. There's just little things that you have to be willing to do. Today, starting today, so that you are best prepared for Cause we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We have no clue, but we want to be best prepared for it. So yeah, just simple things that we can start doing today to help us get there tomorrow.
Okay, and those are the exact things that I want to talk about next week. What are those little things that you can do now to prepare not only for your future but for your children's future?
Mm,
Because it's all about legacy as well. The Bible
yes.
says that you should have an inheritance that passes on to your children's children. And we so busy trying to worry about how it's going to pass to us. We don't even think about our children or our children's children, which is our
Mhm.
grandchildren. So, um, looking forward to the conversation next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Might be a little late, depending on if I remember to hit the button, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So I
I'll
appreciate you,
remind
sir. I'm
you.
gonna let you go, and then we're going to close this out. So you have a great rest of your day and week.
All right, thank you. Thanks, guys, for attending today too.
All right. All right, folks. That was Idris. The I is not really there. Idris is Idris Rasheed Jr., who is in a family business with those who he is with his mom, his dad, who are really trying to make a difference when it comes to finances and financial literacy and financial stewardship. So we do appreciate him, and he'll be back tomorrow. I mean, next week. And like I said, we're going to talk about the discipline that it takes to be good, strong financial stewards. So you don't want to miss that show. I appreciate Aaron. God bless you. And Lady Virgo, thank you for coming through. Of course, you know, this is always more exciting on the rebroadcast than it is sometimes. You may not have had the time to be on the live, but that's okay. That's why we tape it so that you can pick it up later. So, how do you do that? Well, if you're the first time watching this, become a part of Clear Faith Christian Ministries. How do you do that? Well, you just simply on this channel that you're watching now, just hit the subscribe button and become a full member. And that's all it takes with us. We don't do Patreon, we don't do any of that. But we do ask you to meet us on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 8:30 Central Time for a candid conversation with Pastor Devin Miller. And that's where we do our Bible study and commentary, because at the end of the day, it's the word that's going to sustain you. It is not a bricks and mortar church that's going to bring you to where you need to be. And so, please, ma'am, please, sir, consider doing that. We will be on tonight. We're on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. It's Wednesday, so we will be on tonight. So if you're not busy at 8:30 Central Time, come on over and join us. And if you're on TikTok, you can join us there as well under Pastor Devin Miller for a candid conversation with Pastor D. So we invite you on both platforms to come and be a part of Clear Faith Christian Ministries. So we're going to get out your hair. I am 13 minutes over time, but it was a good time to be had by all. So hopefully you'll join us tonight. If not, join us next week where we'll continue the conversation with the Rasheed family on how to be good stewards of your finances in planning today for your future tomorrow. Until next time, may God's richest and greatest blessings be yours. Peace.